Hi, I'm Daniel Wilson. I've spent 15 years building a life based on trust, commitment, and believing the best in people. When I caught my wife with another man, I thought that was the worst of it. Then her parents showed up at my door, looked me in the eye, and called me pathetic. They said I wasn't man enough to keep her interested. They blamed me for her affair, called me a failure as a husband, and told me to sign the divorce papers without making a scene. What they didn't know was that I had 6 months of evidence. Timestamps, locations, recordings, messages, everything. They thought I was weak, broken, too spineless to fight back. So I let them think that. I stayed quiet, nodded along, and let them paint me as the villain. But when I finally sent them that folder of evidence, it wasn't just proof of her betrayal. It was the end of every lie they'd built their daughter's defense on. By then, was the truth enough? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I came home 3 hours early on a Thursday afternoon. The manufacturing plant in Oakridge, where I'd worked quality control for the past 8 years, had sent us home due to a gas leak in the ventilation system. Nothing serious, just precautionary, but it meant I was pulling into our driveway in the middle of a workday for the first time in years. Our house sat on a quiet street in Belmont Heights, a neighborhood where everyone knew everyone, where people waved from porches and kids rode bikes until the streetlights came on. The kind of place where nothing bad was supposed to happen. I noticed an unfamiliar silver sedan parked 2 houses down, engine off, windows tinted. I didn't think much of it at the time. The front door was unlocked. That should have been my first clue. Isabella always locked it during the day, paranoid about break-ins ever since her cousin's place got robbed 3 years ago. I stepped inside, keys jangling as I dropped them in the ceramic bowl by the entrance, the one we'd bought on our honeymoon in Santa Fe. The house was quiet but not empty. There was a presence, a weight in the air that felt wrong. I could hear faint music coming from upstairs, something low and rhythmic that I didn't recognize. Isabella usually listened to pop or podcasts while she worked from home, not whatever this was. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step creaking under my weight. Our bedroom door was cracked open, just enough to see movement inside, just enough to see my wife pressed against someone who wasn't me. I didn't burst in, I didn't shout. I stood there in the hallway, frozen, watching through that narrow gap as my 15-year marriage shattered into something unrecognizable. The man was younger than me, fit, wearing expensive-looking clothes that were currently scattered across our floor. They didn't notice me. They were too lost in each other, too confident in their privacy. I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, but I managed to open the camera app and start recording. 30 seconds. That's all I needed. 30 seconds of undeniable truth captured in high definition, time-stamped, geotagged, irrefutable. Then I backed away, descended the stairs as quietly as I'd climbed them, walked out the front door, got in my truck and drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove through Belmont Heights, past the elementary school where Isabella used to volunteer, past the coffee shop where we'd had our first date, past the park where I'd proposed. I ended up at Crescent Lake, a small reservoir on the edge of town where people came to fish or think or escape. I sat in my truck in the empty parking lot, staring at the video on my phone, watching it again and again, each replay driving the reality deeper into my chest until I could barely breathe. My phone buzzed. A text from Isabella. "Hey babe, how's work? Thinking about tacos for dinner." I stared at that message for a long time, the casualness of it, the performance. I typed back, "Sounds good. I'll pick some up on the way home." I gave it 2 hours, let them finish, let him leave, let her clean up and reset the stage. When I finally pulled back into the driveway, the silver sedan was gone. The house looked exactly as it had that morning, peaceful and perfect and completely normal. Isabella was in the kitchen, laptop open, video call in progress with what looked like a work meeting. She glanced up when I walked in, gave me a quick smile and a little wave, then went back to her screen. I set the bag of tacos on the counter and walked past her to the garage. That's where I stayed for the next 3 hours, sitting on an old stool surrounded by tools and half-finished projects, staring at nothing. Isabella came out once, around 8, leaning against the doorframe with her arms crossed. "You okay?" she asked. "You've been out here forever." Just thinking, I said. About what? Work stuff. She nodded, not really interested, and went back inside. That was the moment I realized she had been lying for so long that it had become effortless. No guilt in her voice. No hesitation, just smooth, practiced deception delivered with a smile. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to her in bed, listening to her breathe, watching the ceiling fan rotate in the darkness. Every few minutes, I'd glance at my phone, at that video sitting in my camera roll like a grenade with the pin already pulled. The next morning, Friday, everything proceeded normally. Isabella made coffee, hummed along to the radio, kissed me on the cheek before I left for work. I drove to the plant, clocked in, went through the motions of quality testing and paperwork. But my mind was somewhere else entirely, running through scenarios, calculating moves, trying to figure out what came next. That evening, Isabella announced we were having dinner at her parents' house. "Mom insists," she said, already halfway out the door. "She made that pot roast you like." I didn't like pot roast. I'd told her that a dozen times over the years. But I nodded and followed her to the car. Harold and Patricia Miller lived in a sprawling ranch-style home in the affluent Pinewood Estates neighborhood, the kind of place with a security gate and landscaping that cost more than most people's cars. Harold had made his money in commercial real estate, buying and flipping properties across 3 states. Patricia came from old money, the kind that gave you an accent and opinions about everyone beneath your tax bracket. They'd never thought I was good enough for their daughter. I was working class, practical, steady, but unremarkable. Isabella had married down, in their view, settled for someone safe instead of someone spectacular. They'd made that clear in 1,000 small ways over the years. Little comments and suggestions and comparisons to Isabella's more successful friends and their more impressive husbands. Dinner started pleasant enough. Harold talked about a property deal in Summitville. Patricia showed off new artwork she'd purchased from some gallery in the city. Isabella played the perfect daughter, laughing at the right moments, agreeing with the right opinions. Then Patricia turned her attention to me. "Daniel, Isabella mentioned you've been distant lately. Everything all right at work?" I glanced at Isabella. She was looking down at her plate, pushing food around with her fork. "Work's fine," I said. "Are you sure? Because if you're having trouble providing, we can always help. We'd hate to see Isabella struggle because of your limitations." The words landed like a slap. Harold chuckled into his wine glass. Isabella said nothing. "I appreciate the concern," I said carefully, "but we're doing fine." Patricia's smile was thin and sharp. "Of course you are, dear. We just want Isabella to have the life she deserves, the life she was raised to expect." The message was clear. I was failing. I was insufficient. I was dragging their daughter down to my level. I excused myself to the bathroom, locked the door, and gripped the edge of the sink until my knuckles went white. In my pocket, my phone felt like it was burning through the fabric. That video, that 30 seconds of truth that would detonate everything. But not yet. Not here. Not like this. When I returned to the table, the conversation had moved on to vacation plans and social events I wasn't particularly invited to. I finished dinner in silence, thanked them for the meal I hadn't enjoyed, and drove home with Isabella chattering about her mother's redecorating project. That night, I started documenting everything. Times, dates, patterns. I checked our phone records, discreetly accessed our shared credit card statements. The evidence was everywhere once I started looking. Hotel charges I didn't recognize, dinner reservations for 2 on nights she claimed to be working late. A pattern stretching back 6 months, maybe longer. I created a folder on my laptop, labeled it Insurance Files so it wouldn't draw attention. Inside, I began building a case, not for divorce court, not yet, but for myself. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that my instincts weren't wrong. Proof that the woman sleeping 3 feet away from me every night had become a stranger. Sunday morning, Isabella's parents called. Conference call, both of them on the line, voices tight with concern. "Daniel, we need to talk about Isabella," Patricia said. My stomach dropped. "What about her? She's unhappy, surely you've noticed." I hadn't said a word to anyone. How did they know? "She deserves more than what you're giving her," Harold added. "More attention, more ambition, more of everything, frankly." "Did she tell you that?" I asked. "Hey, she doesn't have to," Patricia said. "A mother knows. And honestly, Daniel, we think it might be time for you to consider whether you're truly the right partner for our daughter. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. There it was. Not subtle, not kind. Just direct assessment that I was the problem, that I was holding Isabella back, that their daughter's unhappiness was somehow my fault. I should have defended myself. I should have told them what I knew. Instead, I said, "I'll think about what you've said." "Good," Harold replied. "We're only thinking of what's best for everyone involved." They hung up. I sat there with the phone in my hand, staring at nothing, feeling something cold and sharp crystallizing in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something more calculated. Something more patient. Isabella appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a bathrobe, coffee mug in hand. "What did they want?" she asked. "Just checking in," I said. She nodded, already bored with the conversation, and wandered back toward the bedroom. I opened my laptop, navigated to that hidden folder, and added a new document, timeline. Then I started writing everything down. Every detail, every conversation, every lie, building a record that would eventually become undeniable. Outside, the sun was rising over Belmont Heights. Neighbors were walking dogs, collecting newspapers, starting their normal Sunday routines. But inside our house, in that moment, normal had become a performance, and I was learning my lines. What Isabella and her parents didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd been paying attention for months before I ever caught her in our bedroom. It started small, a changed password on her phone, a new privacy screen protector so I couldn't see her screen from an angle, late-night trips to the gym that she'd never been interested in before. Different perfume, different music in her car, little shifts in routine that individually meant nothing but together formed a pattern. I'm a quality control inspector. My entire job is noticing deviations, identifying problems before they become catastrophic failures. I apply the same attention to detail, whether I'm examining welded joints on industrial equipment or examining the slow dissolution of my marriage. 3 months before I came home early that Thursday, I'd done something I'm not proud of. I installed monitoring software on our home computer, the one we both used for personal stuff. Nothing illegal, nothing that violated any laws, just a simple program that logged activity and created backups of files. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I'd uninstall it once I confirmed everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine. The program captured everything. Every deleted message she thought was gone. Every cleared browser history. Every draft email she wrote and never sent. It backed up her cloud storage automatically, creating a mirror of her digital life that she didn't know existed. I found the messages first. Hundreds of them, going back 8 months. The man's name was Trevor Blackwood. He owned a consulting firm in the city, 43 years old, divorced, no ties to our social circle. They'd met at a conference in Portland, started talking, exchanged numbers, and then everything escalated from there. The messages were explicit. Not just physical descriptions, but emotional ones too. Isabella told him things she'd never told me. Said she felt trapped in her marriage, suffocated by suburban mediocrity, tired of playing the role of dutiful wife to a man who would never amount to anything impressive. That last part hit harder than the sexual content, the casual cruelty of it, the contempt. I found hotel receipts, plane tickets for weekend trips she'd claimed were work conferences. I found jewelry purchases I'd never seen her wear, gifts for him hidden in her car trunk. I found a burner phone bill, a second number she used exclusively for communicating with Trevor when she didn't want traces on our shared plan. The deepest cut came from a message she'd sent him 2 weeks before I caught them. "My parents are pushing me to end it with Daniel. I think they're right. He's not a bad person, just a small one. I deserve bigger." I sat with that for 3 days, reading it over and over, trying to understand how I'd become so disposable to someone I'd given 15 years of my life to. But here's what Isabella didn't know, what her parents didn't know, what Trevor definitely didn't know. I wasn't as small as they thought. 5 years ago, I'd invented something. A specialized quality control device for manufacturing plants. A sensor system that could detect microscopic flaws in metal joints before they became structural failures. I'd developed it in our garage over 2 years, working nights and weekends, using money from a small inheritance my grandfather left me. Isabella had watched me build it with mild disinterest. Another hobby project? She'd called it. Her parents had made jokes about me playing inventor, wasting time on pipe dreams instead of focusing on career advancement. What none of them knew was that I'd patented it, filed the paperwork myself, paid the fees, went through the entire process solo. And 3 years ago, after extensive testing and certification, I'd licensed the technology to a major manufacturing equipment company. The deal was structured as a long-term licensing agreement with annual payments. Not a massive windfall all at once, but steady income that deposited directly into a personal account I'd set up before signing the contract. $65,000 per year for 15 years, with performance bonuses if the technology exceeded certain adoption thresholds. It had exceeded those thresholds substantially. My hobby project was now standard equipment in manufacturing plants across North America. The performance bonuses had kicked in. Last year alone, I'd earned an additional $90,000 on top of the base licensing fee. This year was tracking even higher. I'd kept it separate, kept it quiet. Not because I was hiding it maliciously, but because every time I'd tried to share my work with Isabella, she'd dismissed it. Every time I'd mentioned progress or developments, she'd changed the subject or made a comment about me wasting time. Eventually, I just stopped bringing it up. The money went into investments, managed by a financial advisor Isabella didn't know I had, conservative index funds, mostly. Nothing flashy. After 5 years of steady deposits and compound growth, that account had grown to just over $870,000. Isabella thought I made $46,000 a year from the plant. She had no idea that our actual household income was nearly 4 times that. She had no idea that while she was telling Trevor I was mediocre, I was quietly building wealth she couldn't touch because it had never been marital property. The patent was filed before we married, the licensing agreement was signed in my name alone, the investment account existed completely separate from our joint finances. A good attorney would have no problem establishing it as separate property in divorce proceedings. But I wasn't thinking about divorce yet. I was thinking about something else entirely. That Monday after the dinner at her parents' house, I took a personal day from the plant and drove 3 hours north to Maplewood, where my attorney, Richard Vance, had his practice. Richard had handled the patent filing years ago, and I trusted him more than anyone else to understand the situation. I walked into his office with a laptop bag containing copies of everything: the video, the messages, the financial records, the timeline. I spread it all across his conference table, like evidence at a crime scene. Richard spent 2 hours reviewing everything, occasionally making notes, his expression never changing. When he finally looked up, he leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. "This is airtight," he said. "She's been unfaithful, you have documentation, and your assets are cleanly separated. In a divorce proceeding, you'd walk away with everything that's yours, plus a significant portion of marital assets given her infidelity." "I don't want a divorce yet," I said. Richard raised an eyebrow. "What do you want?" "I want her parents to know exactly who their daughter is." He was quiet for a moment, studying me. "That's not a legal strategy." "I know, but it's what I need." Richard tapped his pen against his notepad. "If you're going to do this, do it carefully. Document everything. Don't do anything that could be construed as harassment or revenge. Stay clean, stay legal, and make sure that when the truth comes out, it comes from her actions, not your anger." I nodded. "That's the plan." We spent the next hour mapping out a strategy. Richard would prepare divorce paperwork but hold it in reserve. I would continue documenting, continue gathering evidence, and wait for the right moment. Not for revenge, but for revelation. For truth. I drove home that afternoon feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks: clarity. Not happiness, not satisfaction, just clear understanding of the path forward. Isabella was in the living room when I walked in, video chatting with someone on her laptop. She waved distractedly, and I caught a glimpse of Trevor's face on her screen before she angled it away. Bold, brazen, confident that I was too oblivious to notice or too weak to care. I went to the garage, opened my laptop, and created a new folder: Final Documentation. Inside, I began organizing everything chronologically, building a narrative that would be impossible to deny or dismiss. That night, over dinner that Isabella barely touched while texting under the table, she mentioned her parents wanted us to come over again that weekend. "They want to talk about our future," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Our future?" I repeated. "Yeah, you know how they get. Just go along with it, okay? It'll be easier for everyone." I nodded. "Sure, whatever you think is best." She seemed relieved, probably grateful I wasn't going to make things difficult. She had no idea that I was counting down the days until her parents' carefully constructed image of their daughter shattered into pieces. In my pocket, my phone held that 30-second video. In my laptop, a hidden folder held 6 months of evidence. In a bank account Isabella didn't know existed, $870,000 sat waiting, untouchable, mine alone. She thought I was weak. They all thought I was weak, small, pathetic, a man to be pitied and eventually discarded. They were about to learn the difference between weakness and patience. The week following that conversation about dinner at her parents' house felt like living in a stage play where I was the only one who knew the script was fiction. Isabella moved through our home with the ease of someone who believed her performance was flawless, and I played the role of oblivious husband with equal commitment. Tuesday morning, I found a note on the kitchen counter. "Late meeting tonight, don't wait up, leftovers in the fridge." Her handwriting was neat, almost cheerful. I checked our shared credit card that afternoon and saw a charge from the Ashford Hotel downtown, $240, posted at 11 in the morning. Not a meeting, a room. I took a screenshot, added it to the folder. Wednesday, Isabella spent 3 hours getting ready for what she claimed was a client presentation. Hair styled, makeup perfect, wearing the black dress she used to save for special occasions with me. I watched her leave, waited 20 minutes, then checked the location sharing we'd set up years ago for safety. She was at the Ashford again. I disabled the tracking notification on my end so she wouldn't know I was watching. Thursday evening, her best friend Monica called the house phone, the landline we barely used anymore. I answered, and Monica sounded surprised. "Oh, Daniel." I thought Isabella would pick up. "She's in the shower. Can I take a message?" "Just tell her I confirmed Saturday brunch, the usual place." After we hung up, I went to Isabella's calendar app, synced to our shared account. Saturday showed gym morning session, no brunch. I opened a new browser tab and searched Monica's social media, her latest post from 2 hours ago. "Can't wait for Saturday brunch with my favorite person." Another screenshot. Another file added. Isabella emerged from the shower wrapped in a towel, her phone already in her hand, typing rapidly. Monica called. I said something about Saturday brunch. She didn't even look up. "Oh yeah, I forgot to mention it, just a quick catch-up thing." "I thought you had the gym Saturday morning." "I'll move it to the afternoon." The lie came so easily, no hesitation, no guilt. Just smooth recalibration delivered while scrolling through messages I couldn't see. Friday arrived, the day before dinner at her parents' house. Isabella had taken the day off work, claimed she needed to relax, decompress from a stressful week. I went to the plant as usual, but during my lunch break, I drove home unannounced. The silver sedan was back, parked 3 houses down in the same spot as before. I didn't pull into our driveway. Instead, I parked around the corner, walked back along the tree line where neighbors' hedges provided cover, and positioned myself where I could see our bedroom window. The curtains were open, just slightly, enough to confirm what I already knew. I pulled out my phone, zoomed in, captured another video. 45 seconds this time, clear view of Isabella and Trevor. Timestamp showing 2:15 in the afternoon on a Friday when she was supposedly decompressing alone. I walked back to my truck, hands steady, breathing controlled. Drove back to the plant and finished my shift like nothing had happened. The anger was there, burning underneath everything, but I kept it contained, compressed, stored away for when it would matter most. That evening, Isabella was in an unusually good mood. She made dinner, hummed while cooking, actually asked about my day. The performance was almost convincing. If I hadn't watched her betray me 6 hours earlier, I might have believed things were improving between us. Saturday morning came with bright sunshine and the kind of crisp autumn air that made Belmont Heights feel like a postcard. Isabella left for brunch at 9, kissed my cheek, told me she'd be back by noon. I watched her drive away, waited 10 minutes, then got to work. I went through the house systematically, not searching for new evidence but cataloging everything that would matter later. I photographed the contents of her closet, the jewelry box with pieces I'd never seen her wear, the second phone charger hidden in her gym bag. I checked our joint savings account, the one we'd supposedly been building for a future renovation, and found 3 recent withdrawals totaling $8,500, all marked Personal Isabella. By the time she returned at 12:30, everything was back in place, and I was in the garage organizing tools. "How was brunch?" I called when I heard her car pull in. "Good. Monica's drama never ends, but it was fun." I walked inside. "What kind of drama?" She waved a hand dismissively. "Work stuff. You wouldn't be interested." She was right about that. I wasn't interested in the fictional version of her morning. I was interested in the real one. The one where she and Trevor had late breakfast at the Ashford before checking out at noon. The credit card charge appeared on my phone notification 3 minutes later. Breakfast for two, $87 including tip. That afternoon, we drove to Pinewood Estates for dinner at her parents' house. Isabella was nervous, fidgeting with her phone, checking her reflection in the visor mirror multiple times. I asked if everything was okay. "Fine. Just want tonight to go smoothly." "Why wouldn't it?" She didn't answer. Just stared out the window until we pulled through the security gate and up the long driveway to the Miller residence. Harold and Patricia were waiting on the front steps, dressed like they were hosting a formal event rather than a family dinner. Patricia's smile was tight. Harold's handshake was brief. Inside, the dining room table was set with their expensive china, the kind they usually reserved for impressing business associates. This wasn't just dinner. This was an intervention. We made small talk through appetizers, surface-level conversation about weather and local news. Then, as the main course was served, Patricia set down her wine glass and looked directly at me. "Daniel, we've asked you here tonight because we're concerned. About Isabella, about your marriage, about the future." I set my fork down carefully. "Concerned about what specifically?" Harold leaned forward. "You've been married 15 years. Isabella was 25 when you met, full of potential, ready to build an impressive life. Now she's 40. And what has that life become?" "We have a nice home," I said. "Stable careers. We're comfortable." Patricia's laugh was cold. "Comfortable? What a depressing aspiration." "Isabella deserves more than comfortable, Daniel. She deserves extraordinary. And I'm not providing that." "Your words, not ours," Harold said, though his expression made it clear that's exactly what he meant. Isabella sat silently beside me, eyes fixed on her plate. Not defending me. Not objecting. Just letting her parents dismantle me across their dinner table while she played the victim of circumstance. "We think," Patricia continued, her voice taking on a tone of practiced sympathy, "that you and Isabella have simply grown in different directions. It happens. No one's fault, really. But continuing to hold each other back out of obligation isn't fair to anyone." "You want us to divorce," I said flatly. "We want Isabella to be happy," Harold corrected. "And frankly, we don't think she can be, not in her current situation." I looked at Isabella. "Is this what you want?" She finally met my eyes, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker there. Guilt, maybe, or shame, or just discomfort at having to actually participate in her own betrayal narrative. "I think we should consider all options," she said quietly. "For both our sakes." Patricia reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. "You're being very mature about this, sweetheart. That's not easy." I sat back in my chair, letting the moment hang there. They were waiting for me to react, to get defensive or angry or broken. Instead, I nodded slowly. "I appreciate you sharing your concerns," I said. "This is a lot to process." The relief on their faces was visible. They'd expected a fight, and my compliance felt like victory. Harold actually smiled, raised his glass. "To honest conversations and better futures." I raised my glass but didn't drink. Just watched them over the rim, memorizing every detail of this moment, this tableau of people who thought they'd successfully maneuvered a weak man into accepting his own erasure. The rest of dinner passed in lighter conversation. Patricia talked about an upcoming charity gala. Harold mentioned a new investment property. Isabella gradually relaxed, probably grateful the confrontation had gone smoothly. They had no idea they'd just handed me the final piece of evidence I needed, their own admission, in their own words, that they'd orchestrated the dissolution of my marriage. Yaka. I'd recorded the entire conversation on my phone, sitting face down on the table beside my plate, audio recording app running under a black screen. Every word, every tone, every casual cruelty delivered with smiles and expensive wine. We left around 9. Isabella was quiet on the drive home, maybe processing her parents' words, or maybe texting Trevor about how it had gone. I didn't ask. Just drove through the dark streets of Belmont Heights while calculating the timeline for what came next. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the garage with my laptop, organizing the final pieces of documentation. 6 months of evidence now, neatly categorized, chronologically arranged, undeniable in its totality. Videos, screenshots, credit card statements, hotel receipts, deleted messages, GPS data, audio recordings. A complete narrative of betrayal told through digital breadcrumbs she thought she'd covered. Around 3 in the morning, I created a final document. A timeline with embedded evidence, formatted like a legal brief, professional and devastating in its clarity. I titled it, The Truth About Isabella Wilson. 37 pages of facts, dates, and proof. Then I created a recipient list: Harold Miller, Patricia Miller, Monica, and 4 other friends who'd been part of Isabella's support network. Trevor Blackwood's business email, Isabella's work email, and finally my attorney Richard Vance, who would receive it with instructions to proceed with divorce filing immediately upon confirmation of delivery. My cursor hovered over the send button. 1 click, and everything would detonate. Years of performance and lies would collapse in seconds. The daughter they'd defended would be exposed. The narrative they'd built would shatter. The comfortable illusion they all preferred to truth would evaporate. But not yet. One more piece remained, one more conversation, one final chance for them to reveal exactly who they were before I revealed exactly what I knew. I closed the laptop. Sunday morning sun was starting to filter through the garage windows. Inside the house, Isabella was still sleeping, probably dreaming about her future with Trevor, about freedom from her mediocre marriage, about the bigger life she thought she deserved. She had no idea that life was about to get very small very fast. Sunday afternoon arrived with uncomfortable humidity, the kind that made Belmont Heights feel smaller, more suffocating. Isabella had gone to the gym, her actual gym this time, based on the credit card charge from the membership scanner. I had the house to myself for 2 hours, maybe 3 if she stopped for groceries like she'd mentioned. I went directly to her home office, the small converted bedroom where she kept her work laptop and personal files. She'd always been territorial about this space, asked me not to clean in here or move anything around. I'd respected that boundary for years. Not anymore. Her desk drawers were organized meticulously. Tax documents, old bills, warranty information for appliances we'd purchased. Nothing unusual until I reached the bottom drawer, the deep one with the false bottom. I'd installed myself 3 years ago when she asked for more storage space. I remembered that project clearly. She'd been very specific about the dimensions, wanted it deep enough for hanging files, but with extra space underneath for important documents she didn't access often. At the time, I'd thought she meant old passports or birth certificates. Now I understood she'd been planning ahead. I removed the hanging file rack and lifted the false bottom panel. Underneath sat a manila envelope, unsealed, bulging with contents. I pulled it out and spread everything across her desk. First were the printed emails, dozens of them, between Isabella and her mother Patricia. The earliest dated back 14 months, long before I'd suspected anything was wrong. The subject line of the first one read, "Your options." Patricia had written, "Sweetheart, I've been watching you slowly diminish yourself to fit into Daniel's limited world. You're 40 now. If you're going to make a change, it needs to be soon. I've spoken with Harold, and we're prepared to support you fully, financially and emotionally, through whatever transition you choose." Isabella's response, "I know you're right. I just feel guilty. He's not a bad person." Patricia's reply, "Bad and wrong are different things. He's wrong for you. He was always wrong for you. We tried to accept it, but watching you settle has become painful for us as parents. You deserve passion, excitement, achievement. You deserve someone who matches your level, not someone you have to constantly pull along." I sat back in her desk chair, reading through the entire exchange. Patricia hadn't just supported Isabella's affair. She'd encouraged it, validated it, provided the moral framework that transformed betrayal into self-actualization. Further down the email chain, 3 months later, after Isabella had apparently met Trevor, Isabella, I met someone. It's complicated, but he makes me feel alive again. Patricia, then that's your answer, sweetheart. Life is too short to feel dead in your own marriage. Harold had chimed in on several emails too, offering legal advice, recommending attorneys who specialized in efficient dissolutions, suggesting strategies for asset protection. He'd even provided spreadsheets calculating optimal divorce timing based on tax implications and property values. This wasn't spontaneous infidelity driven by unhappiness. This was orchestrated exit strategy, planned and executed with her parents, full participation. But the emails were just the beginning. Beneath them, I found a legal notepad filled with Isabella's handwriting. Lists, calculations, notes from conversations. One page was titled, Post-D Financial Projection. She'd itemized our assets, the house valued at $420,000 with $300,000 remaining on the mortgage. Our joint savings, currently at $38,000. My 401k from the plant, approximately $115,000. Her retirement account, $92,000. 2 cars, minimal value. Next to each item, she'd written projected division percentages. She expected to walk away with the house, half my retirement, all of the savings, and her own retirement account intact. Below that, she'd written DW pension projection annual, minimal, not worth pursuing. DW Daniel Wilson. My pension, my retirement, dismissed as not worth the effort to claim. At the bottom of the page, total projected settlement, $340K plus house. Freedom by 41. I photographed every page, every email, every calculation. My hands were steady, my breathing controlled. The anger had transformed into something colder, more focused. This wasn't just betrayal. This was business. A calculated exit where I was nothing more than a liquidated asset. The next document was even more damning. A printed draft of divorce papers, not filed yet, but prepared. The petition cited irreconcilable differences and emotional abandonment. It painted me as distant, unsupportive, unwilling to meet her emotional needs. The language was careful, crafted to position her as the suffering party, seeking escape from a marriage that had become joyless. Attached to the draft was a note in Harold's handwriting. Wait until after the holidays. Better optics. Shows you tried to make it work. File in January, settled by March, clean break, minimal drama. They had a timeline, a communication strategy, a narrative prepared for mutual friends and extended family. I was going to be the distant husband who let his marriage die through neglect, and Isabella was going to be the brave woman who finally chose herself. The last item in the envelope was a burner phone, different from the one I'd found evidence of in her gym bag. This one was older, scratched, obviously well used. I powered it on. No passcode, which was careless or arrogant, I wasn't sure which. The message history contained only one contact, saved as M. The conversation stretched back over a year, hundreds of messages. I started scrolling from the beginning. M wasn't Trevor. The writing style was different. More formal, professional. I scrolled faster, looking for context clues, until I found a message that clarified everything. M had written, I've reviewed the documents you provided. In my professional opinion, you have grounds for a favorable settlement, particularly given the income disparity and your contributions to household management. If you proceed, I'd recommend my colleague Sarah Brennan. She specializes in these cases and has an excellent track record. M was Monica, Isabella's best friend, who was also, according to her social media profile I'd checked months ago, a paralegal at a family law firm. The conspiracy extended beyond her parents. Her closest friend had been providing legal guidance for over a year, helping her understand exactly how to maximize her settlement while minimizing my claims. I scrolled through more messages. Monica had coached Isabella on documentation strategies. Keep records of everything you contribute financially. Grocery receipts, household purchases, anything that shows you're managing the home. Courts still favor primary household managers. Another message. Don't engage in obvious arguments. Stay calm, be reasonable. If he seems like the angry one and you're the measured one, it plays better in mediation. And, most damningly, Your emotional affair isn't legally relevant unless he can prove it affected finances or caused him documented psychological harm. Just don't get caught on camera or in writing. Be smart about it. Too late for that, Monica. I copied every message, every photo, every piece of evidence from that phone onto a USB drive. Then I powered it down, replaced it in the envelope, and put everything back exactly as I'd found it. The false bottom clicked into place. The file rack slid back into position. The drawer closed smoothly. Within 5 minutes, the office looked untouched, and I was back in the garage with a USB drive containing proof of a conspiracy that spanned over a year and involved her parents, her best friend, and carefully calculated legal strategy. Isabella returned home 2 hours later, hair still damp from the gym shower, carrying grocery bags. She was humming something cheerful, completely unaware that her hidden documentation had just been documented. "Need help?" I called from the garage. "I got it," she replied, her voice bright, performative. I stayed in the garage, sitting at my workbench, staring at the USB drive in my hand. This changed everything. This wasn't just infidelity. This was fraud, conspiracy, calculated deception involving multiple parties working together to systematically dismantle my life while presenting themselves as concerned family and supportive friends. That evening, I drove back to Maplewood, 3 hours north to Richard Vance's office. I'd called ahead, told him it was urgent, offered to pay triple his usual rate for a Sunday evening appointment. He'd agreed without hesitation. I spread everything across his conference table. The emails, the legal notes, the timeline, the message history with Monica, the USB drive containing copies of everything. Richard went through it methodically, his expression darkening with each new piece of evidence. "This is conspiracy to commit fraud," he said finally. Her parents and her friend provided material support in planning a deceptive divorce strategy. The messages prove premeditation, coordination, and intent to deceive the court about the nature of the marriage dissolution. Can we use this? Absolutely. In fact, you have to. If you don't disclose this evidence and they proceed with their planned filing, you'd be allowing fraud to occur. But Daniel, he looked at me seriously. This is nuclear. Once you deploy this evidence, there's no walking it back. Relationships will be destroyed. Reputations will be ruined. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the video on my phone, the hotel receipts, the credit card statements, the audio recording from dinner at her parents' house, and now this, proof that my marriage hadn't just failed, it had been systematically demolished by people I'd trusted. "I'm prepared," I said. Richard nodded. "Then let's build a case that's absolutely bulletproof." We spent the next 3 hours organizing everything into a comprehensive legal filing. Richard would prepare a preemptive divorce petition, citing Isabella's infidelity with evidence, her parents, conspiracy with documentation, and Monica's unauthorized legal coaching with message history. We would file first, controlling the narrative before they could deploy their planned version. But more importantly, we would simultaneously file for a restraining order preventing Isabella from accessing or liquidating any marital assets, citing evidence of planned financial fraud. And we would send copies of all evidence to the State Bar Association regarding Monica's conduct in providing legal advice while not being an attorney, creating a potential ethics violation for her employer. "When do you want to file?" Richard asked. "Not yet," I said. "One more conversation first. I want them to have one final chance to show me exactly who they are." Richard looked at me carefully. "You're playing a dangerous game." "No," I corrected. "They played a dangerous game. I'm just finishing it." I drove home through dark highways, arriving back in Belmont Heights after midnight. Isabella was asleep, or pretending to be. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching her breathe peacefully and felt nothing but cold clarity. Tomorrow I would attend the family meeting her parents had requested. Tomorrow I would sit quietly while they outlined their vision for my exit from Isabella's life. Tomorrow I would nod and appear broken while recording every word of their final performance. And then I would send them the truth. Monday morning began with manufactured normalcy. Isabella made coffee, scrolled through her phone while eating yogurt, mentioned she had a late meeting Tuesday evening. Each lie delivered with the casual confidence of someone who believed their deception was impenetrable. I went to work at the plant, clocked in at 7, performed my quality control inspections with the same attention to detail I always had. My supervisor, Glenn, noticed I seemed distracted. "Everything okay, Wilson? You've checked that weld junction 3 times." "Just being thorough," I said. He laughed. "That's why you're the best we got." If only he knew that thoroughness was about to dismantle my entire personal life. During lunch break, I sat in my truck in the plant parking lot and called Richard Vance. "The meeting with her parents is scheduled for Wednesday evening," I told him. "They want to discuss our future, which means they're going to pressure me to agree to divorce terms. Will you be recording?" "Every word." "Good. I'll have the filing papers ready by Thursday morning. The moment you give me the green light, we'll submit everything to the court. But Daniel, once we file, there's a mandatory waiting period before it becomes public record. That gives you a small window if you want to handle the personal revelations separately." I'd been thinking about that. The legal filing would expose everything eventually, but it would be clinical, procedural, filtered through court language. What I wanted was more immediate, more personal. I wanted her parents to see exactly what their daughter had done. I wanted Monica to understand her complicity had consequences. I wanted Trevor to know he'd been part of a conspiracy, not a romance. "I'm going to send them the evidence directly," I said, "before the filing becomes public." Richard was quiet for a moment. "That's your right. But be careful about how you frame it. Stick to facts, provide documentation, don't editorialize. Let the evidence speak for itself." "Understood." That evening, Isabella announced she'd invited her parents over for dinner Friday night. "They want to follow up on our conversation from last weekend. I think it's good we're all being open about this." "Whatever you think is best," I said. She seemed relieved by my compliance, probably thought I was resigned to the inevitable, too weak to fight against the united front of the Miller family. She had no idea I was counting down the hours until their carefully constructed world collapsed. Tuesday, I took another personal day from work. Told Glenn I had some family matters to handle. He waved me off with sympathy, probably assumed Isabella and I were having marriage troubles, had no idea how right he was. I spent the day organizing the final elements of my evidence package. I created separate folders for each recipient. Harold and Patricia would receive the most comprehensive version, every email they'd sent, every piece of proof showing their active participation in orchestrating my marriage's destruction. Monica would receive her message history with Isabella, plus a formal letter noting that her conduct would be reported to the State Bar Association and her employer. I wasn't doing it for revenge, though I'd be lying if I said that wasn't part of it. I was doing it because she'd knowingly helped someone commit fraud, and that had consequences. Trevor would receive the timeline of Isabella's relationship with him, including evidence that she'd been planning to divorce me long before they met, meaning he wasn't the cause of our marriage ending, just a convenient excuse. He'd also receive copies of messages where Isabella discussed her strategy for maximizing settlement money, in case he had any illusions about her motives being purely emotional. And Isabella would receive everything, the complete archive. Every video, every screenshot, every message, every piece of evidence showing that I'd known about her affair for months, documented her conspiracy with her family and friend, and watched silently while she performed her role as dissatisfied wife seeking freedom. I created a master document to accompany each package, a letter explaining what the evidence showed and what would happen next. The tone was calm, factual, almost clinical. Richard had reviewed the language to ensure it couldn't be construed as harassment or threats. Just information delivery, nothing more. Tuesday evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called my brother Thomas, who lived 4 hours south in Redwood Valley. We weren't close, talked maybe 3 times a year, but he was family, and I needed someone outside this situation to know what was coming. "Daniel, everything okay?" His voice carried concern. I never called without reason. "Not really. I need to tell you something, and I need you to just listen." I spent 40 minutes explaining everything. The affair, the conspiracy, the evidence, the plan. Thomas didn't interrupt, didn't offer advice, just listened like I'd asked. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Christ, Danny. I never liked Isabella, but I didn't think she was capable of this." "Neither did I. What do you need from me?" "Nothing. I just needed someone to know, in case this goes sideways in ways I haven't anticipated." "It won't. You've been more careful than anyone I know. But call me after, okay? When it's done." "I will." Wednesday arrived, the day of the meeting at her parents' house. Isabella was nervous all morning, kept checking her phone, adjusting her outfit multiple times. She wanted to look right for whatever intervention they'd planned. We drove to Pinewood Estates in silence. Isabella stared out the window, probably rehearsing her lines. I drove with my phone in my pocket, audio recording app already running, red light invisible beneath the fabric. Harold and Patricia were waiting in their formal living room, the one with uncomfortable antique furniture and artwork that cost more than most people's cars. They'd positioned themselves strategically, Harold in his leather chair like a judge, Patricia on the sofa next to where Isabella would sit, a united front with me isolated across from them. We settled into our assigned positions. Patricia poured wine, expensive Cabernet from Harold's collection. I accepted a glass but didn't drink. Needed to stay sharp, needed to remember every detail. "Daniel," Harold began, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone used to controlling rooms. "We appreciate you coming tonight. We know this isn't easy." "We care about you," Patricia added, her tone suggesting otherwise. "We want what's best for everyone involved." "Of course," I said. Isabella reached over and squeezed her mother's hand. The gesture was rehearsed, meant to show solidarity, to remind me I was outnumbered. Harold leaned forward. "We've given this situation considerable thought. Isabella has been unhappy for some time, and we believe continuing this marriage serves neither of you. We think a clean separation is the healthiest path forward," Patricia continued. "No blame, no drama, just two people acknowledging they've grown apart." I nodded slowly, letting them think I was absorbing this, considering their wisdom. "We've spoken with some attorneys," Harold said, pulling out a folder from beside his chair. "Nothing formal yet, just preliminary consultations. They've suggested some frameworks that could make this process smooth and equitable." He slid papers across the coffee table. I picked them up, scanned the contents. It was essentially the same division Isabella had outlined in her hidden notes. House to her, my retirement split, savings divided, clean break by spring. "This seems very detailed for preliminary," I observed. "We wanted to be prepared," Patricia said, "to show you we're serious about making this as painless as possible." "For Isabella." Patricia's smile tightened. "For both of you, Daniel. But yes, our primary concern is our daughter's well-being. Surely you can understand that." Isabella finally spoke, her voice soft, practiced. "I don't want to hurt you. I just can't keep living like this, like we're roommates instead of partners." "Have I been that bad?" I asked, genuine curiosity in my tone. Her eyes flickered. "Not bad, just not enough." There it was, the core of their narrative. I wasn't abusive or cruel or negligent. I was simply insufficient, small, mediocre, not worthy of their daughter's continued investment. Harold cleared his throat. "We're prepared to help facilitate this transition. Cover some costs, help you find a new place, whatever you need to start over." "That's very generous," I said. "We're not trying to destroy you," Patricia added. "We're trying to free everyone from a situation that isn't working." I set the papers down carefully. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," Harold said. "How long have you been planning this?" The room went still. Isabella's hand froze halfway to her wine glass. Patricia's smile faltered for just a moment. "Planning?" she repeated. "We're not planning anything, Daniel. We're responding to reality." "Right. How long have you been responding?" Harold's expression hardened slightly. "I'm not sure I appreciate your tone." "I'm just trying to understand the timeline. When did you first suggest to Isabella that she should leave me?" Isabella stood abruptly. "I need to use the bathroom." She left the room quickly, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Patricia watched her go, then turned back to me with a look that had shed all pretense of warmth. "Daniel, I'm going to be direct. You've been holding Isabella back for years. She's accommodated your limitations, your lack of ambition, your contentment with mediocrity. We tried to accept it, to believe love would be enough, but we can't watch her waste any more of her life. So this has been building for a while." "Years?" Harold confirmed. "We've been patient, we've been supportive, but enough is enough." I nodded, letting their words hang in the air, letting the recording capture every syllable of their admission that this had been a long-term campaign, not a sudden realization. Isabella returned, composed again, and retook her seat. The conversation continued for another hour, circling the same themes. My inadequacy, Isabella's suffering, their generous offer to facilitate my exit, the reasonable timeline they'd proposed. I agreed to everything. Told them I'd review the documents, consider their suggestions, think about what would be best for everyone. My compliance seemed to satisfy them. They probably thought they'd broken me, convinced me to accept my fate gracefully. We left around 9. Isabella was quiet on the drive home, maybe feeling guilty, or maybe just relieved the confrontation had gone smoothly. I said nothing, just drove through the dark streets of Belmont Heights, while my phone in my pocket finished recording their completed mission of conspiracy. Back home, I went straight to the garage, downloaded the audio file, added it to the evidence package, and opened my email. The messages were prepared, the attachments ready, the recipient list complete. My cursor hovered over the send button. In my other hand, my phone displayed the video from that Thursday afternoon months ago, Isabella and Trevor in our bedroom, the timestamp showing 2:15 in the afternoon. Thursday morning, I would go to work like normal. Thursday afternoon, Richard would file the divorce papers with all evidence attached. And Thursday evening, at exactly 6 p.m., every recipient would receive their personalized package of truth. But first, one final night of performance. One last evening of Isabella believing her plan was working, her parents confident in their manipulation, Monica secure in her complicity, Trevor unaware his romance was actually a strategic affair. I closed the laptop and walked back into the house. Isabella was already in bed, scrolling through her phone, probably texting Trevor about how well the meeting had gone. "Night," she called without looking up. "Good night," I replied. Tomorrow the truth would detonate. Tonight, I let them all sleep peacefully in their carefully constructed lies. Thursday morning arrived, with fog rolling through Belmont Heights, turning familiar streets into something ghostly and uncertain. I left for work at the usual time, kissed Isabella on the cheek in a performance we'd both perfected, and drove to the plant through the gray morning light. At exactly 9 a.m., Richard Vance filed the divorce petition with the county courthouse. Adultery cited with video evidence attached. Conspiracy to commit fraud documented with email records. Financial misconduct outlined with transaction histories. Monica's unauthorized legal coaching reported to the State Bar Association with complete message transcripts. Everything submitted simultaneously, creating a legal record that couldn't be undone or denied. Richard texted me confirmation at 9:15, filed, no going back now. I finished my morning inspections, clocked out for lunch, and sat in my truck reviewing the email I'd prepared. 6 recipients. 6 personalized packages. 6 simultaneous detonations scheduled for 6 p.m. The timing was deliberate. Late enough that recipients would be home from work. Early enough that they'd spend the evening processing what they'd received. Isabella would be making dinner. Her parents would be having their evening cocktails. Monica would be settling in for the night. Trevor would be closing his office for the day. At 5:45 p.m., I was back home. Isabella was in the kitchen preparing pasta, humming along to music playing from her phone. She seemed relaxed, maybe relieved that the intervention at her parents' house had gone smoothly, confident that I'd accepted the inevitable. "How was work?" she called when she heard me come in. "Same as always," I replied. At exactly 6 p.m., I pressed send. The emails launched simultaneously, each one carrying its payload of truth to its designated target. I set my phone down and walked into the kitchen. "Need help with anything?" I asked. "Could you set the table?" I pulled plates from the cabinet, arranged silverware, poured water into glasses. Normal domestic routine performed while digital missiles were landing in 6 different inboxes across Belmont Heights and beyond. My phone started buzzing at 6:07. Patricia Miller calling. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, Harold Miller. Voicemail. Then Monica. Then a number I didn't recognize that was probably Trevor. Isabella's phone started ringing at 6:12. She glanced at the screen, saw her mother's name, and answered immediately. "Hey, Mom, what's up?" I watched her face change as Patricia spoke. Confusion first, then disbelief, then something colder settling over her features. She turned away from me, walked toward the living room, voice dropping to a whisper I couldn't hear. My phone buzzed again. A text from Richard. Her attorney just called my office. Emergency motion filed. They're panicking. Isabella returned to the kitchen minutes later, her face pale, phone clutched tight in her hand. "What did you do?" Her voice was barely controlled. "I filed for divorce. Cited your adultery and your parents. Conspiracy to defraud me. Also reported Monica to the Bar Association for providing legal advice without a license. You've been spying on me. I've been documenting your affair and the conspiracy you built with your family and friends. There's a difference. She set her phone down hard on the counter. You had no right. You had no right to spend a year planning to destroy my life while pretending to be my wife. Her hand went to her mouth. The performance was over. No more soft-spoken victim seeking freedom, just cold calculation exposed to light. My parents are going to fight this, she said. Let them try. Everything I filed is documented and true. My phone rang. Monica, her voice panicked when I answered. Daniel, you can't do this. I was just helping a friend. You helped her commit fraud, Monica. That has consequences. I hung up. Isabella stared at me like she'd never seen me before. This isn't you, she said. This is exactly me. You just never paid attention. She grabbed her keys and left without another word. Through the window, I watched her car disappear into the fog. The house fell silent. I sat alone, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Friday morning broke clear and cold over Belmont Heights. I woke early, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table watching sunrise paint the empty house in shades of amber and gold. My phone had been buzzing periodically through the night, calls and messages I'd ignored, letting them pile up like evidence of the chaos unfolding beyond my walls. At 8 a.m., the courthouse opened. By 8:15, the divorce filing became public record. Anyone with internet access could now pull up case number 2024, Dr. 3847, and read every documented detail of Isabella Miller Wilson's affair, her parents, conspiracy, and Monica's complicity. My phone exploded. Text messages flooded in from people I hadn't heard from in years, neighbors, former co-workers, friends from the early years of our marriage who'd drifted away. Most expressed shock. Some offered support. A few asked if I needed anything, their messages careful, probably unsure what to say to someone whose private devastation had just become public spectacle. But the most telling messages came from people in Isabella's circle. Her yoga instructor sent a brief note. I always knew something was off. I'm sorry you went through this. A couple we'd socialized with for years. We had no idea. Patricia always made it sound like you were the problem. That last one struck hardest. Patricia had been working the narrative for months, maybe years, poisoning mutual friendships against me before the divorce even started. Except now, those same people could read the emails, see the evidence, understand exactly who had been manipulating whom. At 9 a.m., my phone rang with a number I recognized, Glenn from the plant. Wilson, you okay? I just saw something online about your divorce. Word was spreading fast. In a town the size of Belmont Heights, courthouse filings were public entertainment, especially ones involving prominent families like the Millers. I'm managing, I said. Thanks for checking. Listen, take the day if you need it. Hell, take the week. You've got the time built up. I appreciate it. I'll let you know. I wasn't going to hide, wasn't going to act like I'd done something shameful, but I also wasn't ready to face the questions, the sympathetic looks, the inevitable workplace gossip. I'd earned a day to process this in private. At 10 a.m., Richard called. It's a firestorm, Daniel. Harold Miller's attorney has been on the phone all morning trying to negotiate a gag order. The Bar Association opened a formal inquiry into Monica within an hour of receiving our complaint, and someone leaked the filing to the local news blog. Which means by this afternoon, everyone in Belmont Heights will know the details. The Millers are prominent enough that this is newsworthy. Wealthy real estate developer and his wife caught conspiring to defraud their son-in-law. It's the kind of story that gets shared. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. I'd wanted the truth exposed, but I hadn't fully considered the scale. This wasn't just about justice anymore. This was about public humiliation, reputation destruction, social exile. Are you having second thoughts? Richard asked, reading my silence. No. They earned this. I just didn't expect it to move this fast. The internet moves faster than conscience. By tonight, this will be everywhere. He was right. By noon, the Belmont Heights Community Forum had a thread titled Miller Family Divorce Scandal, with over 200 comments. I didn't read them all, just skimmed enough to understand the temperature. Public opinion had turned decisively against Isabella and her parents. Always knew Patricia was manipulative. One comment read, "Guess the apple doesn't fall far." Another, Harold Miller tried to screw me on a property deal 5 years ago. Karma's real. And perhaps most damning, My wife works at the firm where Monica was employed. Past tense. She was terminated this morning. Monica had lost her job. 4 hours after the Bar Association received my complaint, her employer had cut ties to protect their reputation. Part of me felt guilty about that. She'd been trying to help a friend, however misguided. But another part remembered those messages coaching Isabella on how to maximize settlement money while hiding her affair. And the guilt faded. At 2 p.m. my doorbell rang. I looked through the window and saw Harold Miller's Mercedes in my driveway. He was alone, standing on my porch in an expensive suit, looking older than I'd ever seen him. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Daniel." His voice was measured, controlled, but I could see the strain beneath. "We need to talk. I don't think we have anything to discuss. Please, 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind me. We stood in the cold afternoon air, two men who'd spent 15 years pretending to be family. "You've destroyed my daughter's reputation," Harold said. "Patricia's social standing is ruined. My business is taking calls from concerned investors. You've hurt people beyond Isabella." I documented the truth. If that hurts, maybe the problem isn't the documentation. We were trying to help her. She was unhappy. You were trying to help her steal from me while painting me as the villain. There's a difference, Harold. His jaw tightened. "What do you want? Money? An apology? Tell me what it takes to make this go away." "It can't go away. It's public record. The truth is out there now, and you can't buy it back or negotiate it into silence." "Then what was the point? Revenge?" "Accountability," I corrected. "You spent over a year manipulating this situation, coaching Isabella on how to maximize her settlement, helping her build a false narrative about our marriage. You actively participated in fraud. The point is consequences." Harold looked at me for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Not quite respect, but recognition maybe, understanding that he'd miscalculated who he was dealing with. "You're not the man I thought you were," he said finally. "No, I'm exactly the man I've always been. You just never bothered to look." He turned to leave, then paused. "Isabella's staying at a hotel. She's devastated." She should be. She destroyed a 15-year marriage for an affair that was really just an exit strategy. She earned a devastation. Harold walked back to his Mercedes without another word. I watched him drive away, probably heading back to Pinewood Estates where Patricia was managing their own crisis, fielding calls from friends who'd read the filing, answering questions about their daughter's behavior. By evening, my phone had accumulated over 100 messages. Most were supportive. Some were curiosity disguised as concern. A few were from reporters asking for interviews. I ignored them all except one. Thomas, my brother, texted, "Saw the news. You doing okay?" I replied, "Better than I expected." "Good. You need anything?" "No, but thanks for checking." The sun set over Belmont Heights, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. I stood at my kitchen window, looking out at the quiet street, the familiar houses, the neighborhood that had been my home for a decade. Everything looked the same, but everything had changed. Isabella's carefully constructed image as the suffering wife had collapsed. Her parents' reputation as pillars of the community had cracked. Monica had lost her career. Trevor had discovered he'd been a tactical affair, not a romance. And me? I was standing in an empty house that suddenly felt less like a prison and more like possibility. My phone buzzed one final time. A text from an unknown number. "Mr. Wilson, this is Trevor Blackwood. I owe you an apology. I had no idea about any of this. For what it's worth, I'm sorry." I stared at that message for a long time, then typed back, "You were a symptom, not the disease. But thanks." The truth was out there now, spread across public records and community forums and whispered conversations. Isabella, her parents, Monica, Trevor, everyone who'd participated in the conspiracy now had to live with public knowledge of what they'd done. And I had to live with the consequences of exposing them. Not regret exactly, but awareness that I'd unleashed something that couldn't be contained, that would ripple through Belmont Heights for months or years, affecting people and relationships in ways I couldn't predict. But as I stood there in my quiet house, watching night fall over the neighborhood, I felt something I hadn't felt in 6 months of documentation and strategy and careful planning. Freedom. 3 weeks passed before the dust began to settle. I'd taken time off from the plant, using accumulated vacation days to process everything in private. The house felt different now. emptier in ways that had nothing to do with Isabella's absence. It was the silence of a story that had finally reached its conclusion. Belmont Heights moved on faster than I expected. Small towns have short attention spans, always hungry for the next scandal. But the damage to the Miller family remained visible for anyone paying attention. Harold's real estate business had lost 2 major clients within days of the filing going public. Investors spooked by association with documented fraud had quietly severed ties. Patricia had resigned from 3 charity boards, her carefully worded statement citing, quote, personal matters that everyone understood meant shame. Their social calendar, once packed with galas and fundraisers, had gone conspicuously quiet. Monica left town entirely. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard she'd moved to Portland, starting over somewhere her name wasn't attached to a bar association inquiry, and terminated employment. Part of me felt guilty about that outcome. She'd been trying to help a friend, however misguided. But then I'd remember those messages coaching Isabella on maximizing settlement money while hiding infidelity, and the guilt faded into acceptance that actions have consequences. Isabella was living in a rental condo across town, funded by her parents who were desperate to maintain appearances. We'd had no direct contact since that Thursday night when she packed her bags and left. Everything flowed through attorneys now, Richard and her lawyer negotiating asset division with clinical detachment. The divorce would finalize in another 6 weeks. The house would be sold, proceeds divided equally, despite my evidentiary advantage. I didn't fight it, wasn't interested in prolonging the process just to extract maximum damage. I wanted it over, wanted the clean break that would let both of us move forward. On a Saturday morning in late November, I drove to Crescent Lake, the same reservoir where I'd sat 6 months earlier watching that first video on my phone, trying to process what I'd discovered. The parking lot was empty, autumn leaves scattered across cracked pavement, the water reflecting gray sky like polished steel. I sat on a bench overlooking the water and called my brother Thomas. "How you holding up?" he asked. "Better. Some days harder than others, but better overall." "That's progress. You thinking about what comes next?" "I've been considering selling the house. Too many memories here, too much weight." "Where would you go?" "Maybe Maplewood. Fresh start. Place where nobody knows my story." Thomas was quiet for a moment. "You sound different. Calmer, maybe." He was right. The anger that had sustained me through 6 months of documentation and strategy had burned itself out, leaving something else behind. Not quite peace, not quite satisfaction, just acceptance of what had happened, and determination to build something better from the ruins. "I start therapy next week," I said. "Real therapy. Not just processing the divorce, but examining why I stayed so long, why I didn't see the signs earlier, how I let myself become invisible in my own marriage." "That's good, Danny, really good." We talked for another 20 minutes about ordinary things. His work, his family, normal life continuing despite my extraordinary circumstances. When we hung up, I sat alone watching ducks glide across the lake's surface, their movements creating ripples that spread and faded. My phone buzzed. An email from Richard, with the subject line, "Patent Licensing Update." The manufacturing equipment company wanted to expand our agreement, incorporate my technology into new product lines. The revised deal would increase my annual payments by 40%, pushing my yearly income from the patent alone to over $200,000. I read it twice, then looked back at the water. Isabella had called me mediocre. Her parents had labeled me insufficient. They'd all believed I was too small to matter. Meanwhile, I'd been quietly building something that would support me comfortably for years. The irony wasn't lost on me. Neither was the hollowness of vindication. Yes, I'd proven them wrong. Yes, the truth had demolished their carefully constructed lies. Yes, justice had been served in ways both legal and social. But none of that returned the 15 years I'd invested in a marriage that had been dying, long before I noticed. None of that erased the nights I'd lain awake questioning my worth, because the people closest to me had convinced me I had none. Victory, I was learning, didn't heal everything. It just created space for healing to begin. The following week, I met with a realtor. She walked through the house, making notes without asking about the divorce. Professional discretion I appreciated. "You could get $450,000 easily," she said. "Good neighborhood, well maintained." Probably sell within a month. Let's list it. The for sale sign went up 3 days later. I stood in the driveway looking at it, feeling lighter than I had in months. This house had been a dream once, back when Isabella and I were young and believed love conquered practical concerns. Now it was just a building, walls and floors that had witnessed the slow dissolution of everything we'd promised each other. December brought the first offer. Full asking price, cash buyers, 30-day close. I accepted immediately. By mid-January, I was packing boxes in an empty house that no longer felt like home. Isabella's attorney had requested one final meeting to coordinate division of minor personal items. I agreed to meet on a Saturday morning. She arrived at 10, looking thinner than I remembered, tired in ways that went beyond physical exhaustion. We stood in the empty living room, voices echoing off bare walls, two strangers who'd once promised forever. "I wanted to apologize," she said quietly. "Not because my lawyer suggested it, but because I genuinely am sorry. What I did was wrong. How I did it was cruel. You deserved better." I nodded, accepting the words without letting them penetrate too deeply. Apologies didn't undo damage, they just acknowledged it. "I've been in therapy too," she continued, trying to understand why I made those choices, why I let my parents influence me so heavily. "I hope you find answers," I said. "I hope whatever comes next makes you happy in ways I apparently couldn't." "You could have. I just wasn't paying attention." She collected her few remaining items and left. When the door closed behind her, I felt something release in my chest. Not relief exactly, just finality. By February, I'd moved to Maplewood. Small apartment, mountain views, quiet enough to think clearly. I started attending a divorce recovery group, sitting in circles with people who understood the peculiar grief of watching partnerships dissolve. The therapy was working, slowly revealing patterns I'd ignored for years, how I'd accommodated myself smaller to fit Isabella's expectations, how I'd accepted her parents. Dismissiveness as truth rather than opinion. How I'd let external validation determine my self-worth. Understanding didn't erase the damage, but it provided framework for building something healthier. March brought the final divorce decree. 15 years compressed into legal language about irreconcilable differences in asset division. I read it once, filed it away, and felt the last chain break. That evening, I opened my laptop and started sketching new ideas for quality control applications, innovations I'd set aside when my marriage demanded all my emotional energy. Ideas flowed faster than I could capture them. I was building, again, not for validation or to prove anything, but because creating had always been who I was beneath the roles I'd played for others. One morning in April, I received an email from the manufacturing company offering me a consulting position, developing new applications for their expanded product lines. The compensation was generous, the work was exactly what I loved. I accepted immediately. By summer, my first consulting project had increased their quality detection accuracy by 37%. They were thrilled, I was proud. And for the first time in years, I felt like my work mattered to people who actually valued it. September marked 1 year since that Thursday afternoon. I spent the anniversary alone on my apartment balcony, watching sunset paint the mountains in shades of orange and purple. I'd won, by any objective measure. Isabella's betrayal exposed. Her parents, conspiracy documented. Justice served. But sitting there watching the day end, I understood that winning hadn't been the point. Surviving had been the point. Rebuilding had been the point. Learning to value myself regardless of external validation had been the point. The anger had burned away, leaving something more valuable. Self-respect earned through choices I could stand behind, boundaries I'd enforced when it mattered, and willingness to demand truth even when lies were more comfortable. My phone buzzed. Text from Thomas. 1 year. You doing okay? I replied, yeah, actually, I really am. And for the first time since that Thursday afternoon 12 months ago, I meant it completely. Isabella had called me pathetic. Her parents had labeled me insufficient. They'd all believed I was too small to matter. They were wrong. I'd always mattered. I just needed to stop seeking their permission to believe it. Peace isn't about winning. It's about no longer needing to fight. The war was over. I'd survived. And that, ultimately, was victory enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.